once that happens and once you catch on that what you have done is not something you did by accident or based on your imagination, and you look at that and you now know that there is something beyond the physical and that you are part of that you contribute to it, that you learn from it, that you can journey within it, that's transformation.
You have wondered what you would be able to do if you were the ultimate version of you, right? You would then have an easy time creating what you want, and yes, effortlessly enjoying life too. Now, you may know this already, the influence you have over your reality is far beyond what you've been told. Soon, you realize that your outer world is merely a mirror of your inner world, and we're here to connect the dots for you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to God Mode.
Welcome back to God Mode. Now, this episode, we're going to really talk about some weird stuff that we were going to talk about in the last episode, but we're going to do that now. And let's jump right into it, yeah? Welcome back.
Oh, gosh.
I figured this would tickle the audience fancy. And
every one of these questions have been asked before. Might as well just cram them all together in one, in one segment and get it over with.
And the best part is they can, if they ever ask you weird questions in class, we could just be like, hey, go listen to this episode.
We'll throw a beanbag at them or something, you know.
Yeah, they'll know exactly what they will know this by the time they come to class because they'll be directed to watch this. So first question I want to ask, because I remember when I went to your class the first time, you're like, hey, how many of you believe in life after death? And we're like, it's got to be a trick question. David's asking this. And then we're looking at each other. We're like, yes, we believe. Some people are like, I don't think that anyone was like, I don't believe. And then you're like, how would you like to know? And we're like, tell us, right? And so if you would, tell us a little bit about, from a remote viewing expert standpoint, and frankly, you're the only one from your unit that have trained at this level and continue to develop skills beyond the levels that was trained, during your time at the unit. You're the only one on Earth right now. So I'm curious, like from your perspective, what is life after death? Have you guys ever did a project, remote viewing life after death?
No, but to qualify the last statement that you made, the difference in me and all of my former colleagues in that unit is that I had no pre-stated idea of clairvoyance or clairaudience or clairsentience. I made no pretense of that whatsoever. I just had an incident where I got zinged in the helmet right out in the desert and had some sort of dream or nightmare, whatever you want to call it, and that was it. All of them came into the unit with some pre-stated, sense that they were clairvoyant on some level, right? And all of them did, and I was the only one that did not. And because they came in with this pre-stated ability, which actually got them to the unit, I mean, it wasn't like they just were pulled out of a pool of neutral people and pulled in there. These were people that got there because somehow they went recruiting for them, and people made that statement. I want to tell you a story about Sony Music when we get there. Quite similar. So I came from a science background, and none of them did. I mean, other than Lynn Buchanan, who was a computer IT guy, everybody else was something else. Ed Dames was a linguist. Mel Riley was a photo image interpreter. Paul Smith was, I think, with a 36. So what he did was plot enemy order of battle, on maps. So if I was running a special ops thing and he was our S2 or assistant S2, I'd come to him and go, okay, so there's this weapon system and this weapon system is what you're telling me. What's the range? What's the capability? And what's the composition of the unit?
Wow.
So that's what he would tell me. Well, there are 12 guys per gun. There's 3 guns in this thing. And they like to array them in this way with the terrain. That's what somebody in his capacity did. Gabrielle Pettengill was something similar, but I don't think she was a tactical intel officer. And I don't know what Skip was, and Joe McMoneagle was a warrant officer. So as a warrant officer in intel, a warrant officer always indicates that you're a specialist in some area. So you come out as a NCO and then you become a warrant. They give you a warrant to become a warrant officer. Warrant officers are like typically pilots and motor officers and those kinds of things. So I don't know what he did, but that was it. I mean, these people, and even the ones that came after. I mean, Angela and Robin, the two civilian girls that were in the remote viewing unit, they were probably analysts in the DIA, and that's how they got there. So here I show up as just I was the only special operations combat arms officer to ever be brought in there before or even after I left. And there were two new people that were brought in as I was heading out the door. So the difference between all of us was when you came into the organization and all you were asked to do was what you already believed that you were capable of doing, then you had really no interest in trying to move that forward.
Got it.
Which is why there was no manual, no program of instruction, no training outline, nothing, One of them claims that he wrote a manual, and then I was on a podcast with Lynn Buchanan a month or so ago, and we brought this subject up because somebody asked it, and Lynn Buchanan said it wasn't a manual. He said the guy wrote it as a briefing outline for a VIP. Like if a general came into the unit and said, tell me what you do here, they would slide this, this 12-page outline over, and that was that. So when I got there, I was really disturbed by the fact, because I had come from the training arena where you're training your Rangers to close with the enemy and destroy the enemy and stay alive and those kinds of things. And being an Army trainer it was always an important thing to me, and understanding the human performance metrics and understanding how to build the curriculum and those things. So my job, I felt while I was there, was to not only learn what I was being asked to do, but to understand every aspect of it, to understand the physics behind it, to understand why and how it was working, not just to turn around and say, well, okay, if I do this, then I'll get a result. Some people, I guess, are okay with that, but I was not. I want to know, I don't want to just know what time it is. I want to know how the watch functions kind of thing. So I spent huge amounts of my time, if I wasn't operational, wasn't working an operational target or a training target, then what I was doing was studying what this was. And quite frankly, that was a difficult time. The internet did not exist for us at that time. So you're going to the library. And I'll tell you, most military post libraries are not thick on metaphysical books, So pretty sparse work. And you can go grab a lot of physics books and look at that stuff. It's even sparse on the shelf with those as well. But you can gradually at least get a better grasp on it than what was there. So in my last 2 months there, they knew I was leaving to go to Torn Image, but so Dr. Jack Verona, who was the lead scientist of the Defense Intelligence Agency, who oversaw the program as the lead scientist because it was under the Directorate of Technology and Science, and Fern Gavin, who was the program manager at GS-15, they asked me to write a manual because they knew I could, and they knew what kind of a trainer I was in the Ranger Regiment and as an airborne company commander before that. So I wrote a manual. I wrote a 230-some-odd page manual that incorporated the physics and everything else that I could think of that should be in there. Wow. A detailed manual with, a written example of what a perfect session should look like, right? And From what I understand, after I left, Fern Gavin basically was retired or did retire, and they brought a guy, Dale Graff, down, who I never met, to be the program manager. And I stopped back in one time when I was on my way out to go to Command and General Staff College, knocked on the door, and I came in, and I'm not making this up. They were celebrating something, right? Doing something. But when I came in, Angela and Robin were dressed in witches' costumes, and Dale Graff had like this wizard's hat on his head, and I just looked at it like, holy shit, Now, again, they were just playing and celebrating something, but I just walked in to say, see, I'm going to Command and General Staff College. I want to check in and say hi. And Fern Gavin was actually still there, had not been retired yet, but he'd been relegated to sit on the couch and read a newspaper every day and not be involved in anything. So the place was disintegrating rapidly, not because I left, but just because it was disintegrating rapidly because of its own conduct or lack thereof. So that was the last I saw of it when I left. And I just walked out shaking my head ruefully, like, what has happened here? But they had that manual, but they did not ever use it. And I don't know if Dale Graff tossed it. I don't know if Paul or somebody else tossed it. I have no idea. I know that there was always a degree of animosity because I was only there 3 years. And some of them were there 15 years and more.
Wow.
Yeah, 3/4 plus of a military career in that same place. Unheard of. Absolutely unheard of that would happen. I mean, never my intent to do that. I wanted to get in there, do what I needed to do during the time I had to be there. Then I got recruited into another special access program. And then it was time to go to Command and General Staff College and then get back to troops as quick as I could. I could not stay in a place like that. It would be poison to me in my career, but it was also poison to me in my mind. I did not want to stay there in that place.
Why would you say it's poison?
To my career?
Or just to you, or both?
Well, it's poison to my mind because the place was very acrimonious with everything going on there. People were constantly in turmoil about things. Example, we were supposed to be trained in coordinated remote viewing and extended remote viewing, and then decide which one you were going to focus on. And then all of a sudden, somewhere in there, Fern and Dale apparently allowed Angela and Robin to turn into channelers or to be transmediums. And they never did remote viewing, ever. In fact, they just did CRV and either quit halfway through it or
So it was an undisciplined unit.
Undisciplined, which caused all of the people who were remote viewers to be there. Not me, mind you, because I didn't have a big vested tenure there. I just saw what we were doing there as, how can you argue about pretty much anything here? I mean, look what we do every day. We come here, and if you're an extended remote viewer, you get a target tasking, you go next door, go into an ERV room, which has a bed and a blanket and a pillow in it, right? You adjust the rheostat and the lights, put on a cool down cassette tape, and you go into an altered state of consciousness and attack that target. Come back up to a nonlinear mind map, write your session from the nonlinear mind map, include your sketches, you go back over and turn it in. And then dust your hands off and then go sit in your cubicle. And then, what's next? You may not get another target for another day. You might get one in the afternoon, but there's certainly no assurance of that. So I couldn't find a lot of things to argue about in there. I mean, I was bored as hell because I could then go study and read and do what I wanted to do. But I typically went into the historical files, meaning the files of all the sessions, and I would look through them all. And during the 3 years that I was there, I think there were 6 file safes that were 4 drawers, and they are safes. So they lock them up at night, that kind of stuff, and sign out that you've locked them. But during the day, they're all open, and you're encouraged to go look and to learn and to read. So what I did do was I looked at every session that everybody who was there before me and who was there with me, what they did. So I'm not fooled by any claims of grandeur by people, or I was the best, or they were the best, or they were this, or they were that.
You knew everything about everyone.
I looked at every session, operational and training, that every one of them ever did.
Wow.
So what I tell people now, and I sincerely mean this, is that because of morphic resonance, 100th monkey effect, whatever you want to call it, remote viewers who are trained well now, perform better and are better remote viewers than any of us ever were. And I speak from experience. I've seen everything that every one of them did. So
wow.
if when they stand up and talk about how great they were, I know exactly what they were, just as I know exactly what I was. I was no better, no different. I mean, they said I learned it faster than anybody had learned it, and they said that my intelligence reports were consistently good. Well, they're never consistently good, because I know that there were some times when I would be told, yeah, we don't think you were on target. So, but their efficiency reports said, learned it. I think they actually gave it a statistical rating. Learned this 40% faster than anybody else. First, he was operational within 3 months, which meant that that had never happened before. I still see the product from remote viewing students now. That is, they are consistently better than any of us were as spies for the U.S. government using this intelligence collection tool.
So what you're saying is, as we put together a class, and if we set up a target to go after a place and time, perhaps outside of whatever we think the physical world is, like life after death, these people will have a better chance of knowing exactly what that looks like, sound like, feel like, than the unit that, and you said you guys didn't do it.
No, we didn't do that. But let me just explain what that means. The whole purpose of coordinate remote viewing, as I teach it, is to transform. In other words, it's designed to be scientifically based and trained. It's designed to be taught with precision. It's designed to be measured empirically against known quantifiable attributes for each target and your data, and video feedback followed by hardcore written feedback with links and all of measurable attributes.
So unless I get a video of what that looks like, we can't verify.
So you get empirical data that eventually, through the process, and I know about where that happens for people, usually around stage 3, which would be day 3 or 4, depending on where we are with it. But the point is that when that happens and you suddenly understand that you may believe that there is something beyond the physical, and you may believe that you are part of it, or that you can interact with it or learn from it, you may believe that. Just like you may believe that there is nothing beyond the physical. If you are, don't bother coming into class. But if you believe that maybe it's there, then until you experience this, you'll always just believe. And even if you think you have some evidence within yourself that there is life beyond the physical, there will always be that doubt light flashing in the back of your mind. And why? Because you only believe it. And you have only an anecdotal experience with which to base that. You have to have the empirical evidence to shift it. Once that happens, and once you catch on that what you have done is not something you did by accident or based on your imagination, and you look at that and you now know that there is something beyond the physical and that you are part of that you contribute to it, that you learn from it, that you can journey within it, that's transformation. Now you're a changed human being, and you will never see the world in the same way again. You'll never look at another person or hear another person speak, right? You'll never listen to other things going on around you in the world and not be far more discerning than you ever were before. You are now hyper intuitive. I've had a lot of students that just crack me up. They'll chat in the Zoom classes and they'll come back and go, I just realized I have a superpower. Yeah, we all do. We're born with it. But, now you have absolute empirical, irrefutable, undeniable evidence that you are that and that you are part of that. Now, once that happens, I said, as they told me, once you get to this place, which they didn't even know how to define that place, your life will never be the same. And it will never be the same. And you experience the same thing. Mm-hmm. Your life will never be the same because of that. Now, once with that, now there's something beyond the physical and you're part of it. Life after, in the hereafter or in the pre-existence, while those remain suppositions, now that you know that you are connected something outside of the physical, you're connected to it.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Now, could we set up a team and say, oh, well, we're going to go, the notion of the target, concept of the target in the mind of the person assigning the coordinates to the target, could it be life after death? It could be. The reason I don't do that is because even though you know that there's something beyond the physical and you're part of it, I have no way to give you any kind of empirical validation over what you're seeing is real. Do you understand? I can't give you feedback for that unless I shoot you in the face. But, so, which I won't do.
Good.
But I can't give you empirical evidence of that. Does that mean you shouldn't do it? No. It means that while you can know something, that's one category of knowing, because I can give you empirical evidence that says, see, you did this. For those things like that, before you got here and when you leave, I cannot give you empirical evidence. So now it becomes experiential. If you want to do that or, go there either in thought incubation or you want to go there in a remote viewing session on your own, it's an experience. And is it experience-based and is it anecdotal? Yes. And I don't mind that. I mean...
So I got a question that it comes from an angle where in Upgrade, we teach a concept where it's called a custom emotion, where it's a not naturally occurring emotion, where we combine multiple different emotions to different percentage of intensity, and we combine them, and we install it and tie it to a very specific moment. It's like unto anchoring in NLP in the old days, but it's not. It's literally like a designer emotion, and you design it. Well, I've utilized this to, for example, tie it into things that I can't prove. Let me put it this way. Let's say I get an intuition to call someone. And if I do it and then some tangible outcome occurs, I tie this designer emotion to that specific feeling of intuition. Next time I have it and I do the same thing and I get a specific outcome, and then I tie that emotion again. So over time, my unconscious mind gets trained to have this custom emotion tied to specific type of intuition that was previously proven. Would it be possible for us to do an experiment like that where over time the class, because we can give them evidence.
Well,
right?
you're based on how I understand what you just did, you do have a degree of empirical evidence. You're tying it to something to an outcome that actually happens, right?
Right.
And so then you're cycling back, and when you tie it to that, there's an outcome again. So the outcome becomes your empirical measurement. You can't specifically, let's just say that in a particular scientific model, they would turn around to you and say, yeah, well, you're trying to state that a particular emotion, designed or otherwise, creates a specific outcome. That doesn't work for us. That doesn't matter. What's in your teachings, that is empirical, because there's a result, right? And whenever that emotion cycles back around again, a like result occurs. It's a soft empirical evidence, but it's sufficient to be able to provide feedback to the neural circuitry, and to the people listening. It's a feedback. It's an empirical evidence of something.
So then if we somehow do that with multiple CRV or ERV targets where they got accurate results, we tie that feeling to accurate results, their mind now is trained to spit out that custom emotion to that accurate results. So now we send them to the target of life after death. I think they would get certain feelings if there was anything.
Possibly, but life after death and an outcome in your reality, two completely different things. You follow? So the outcome that you're tying that custom emotion to has an outcome in your physical reality. That's what you're looking at. So that's empirical. The other, tying the emotion, custom or otherwise, to that intended outcome.
So what if it's not outcome? What if it's what they saw? And then
We still have no way of proving what they saw is real or not.
right, I mean like previous to that, right?
Oh, you're saying like a calibration.
Yeah.
I understand the concept. It still
Yeah.
has issues. The concept is calibrating. So you're trying to say that I'm going to use this emotion that has tied to a measurable outcome, and
Or a visual of some sort that they saw.
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
Still, when you're reaching into something that's outside the physical realm, even with a calibration target, could it imply that their perceptions, verbal and visual, are possibly more accurate, than at some other time? Yes, it's a speculation or an assumption. I mean, if you've got a track record, right, in doing one thing, and you think that the performance rate is really scaled up in percentile of accuracy, then you now look at something outside that absolute empirical cycle, and you come back with something. Isn't an assumption, and is the assumption fair that it is more accurate than had you not calibrated before you did that? Yes. It won't hold up in court, but it will, it's an assumption. But I'm very comfortable with just having the experiential, right? Just having the experience of it and leaving it in that way.
So how did you guys do off-planet missions that were places you guys never had empirical data?
With the same understanding.
That same model that we're just talking about right now? Got it.
Yeah, you can, if you understand the Drake equation, which discusses the probability of other inhabitable planets in our galaxy, it has a great deal of flawed assumptions in it. First of all, it's talking about the potentials for other life, but it relates it all to us. So in other words, we're so arrogant that even in the establishment of that equation, which has been considered for a very long time about the possibility of other life in our galaxy, we're only looking for planets that are habitable based on our needs. And it establishes, a series of criteria that enter into the equation, and all of those are weighted. And then when you come out of that, it gives you a numerical estimate of the number of habitable planets, meaning fresh water, oxygen to breathe, et cetera.
Severely limiting.
Severely limiting, because other life might exist in liquid methane or swim in acid or, breathe something entirely different. Who Who knows, right? I mean, use your imagination. It could be anything. They don't have to be oxygen breathers. Or certainly don't have to drink fresh water as we do, or
Yeah,
need,
who knows?
you
300
be
billion
omnivores
stars.
or herbivores or carnivores. It could be anything, right? So that's a severe limiting. So, but if I look at it from a scientific perspective, and then I have to say that the idea that there is other life in this universe, that I would have to be an absolute closed-minded individual, embracing absolutism, that because I haven't seen it or touched it, then it doesn't exist. It's mathematically ridiculous to do that. It is scientifically outrageous to do that. It is unrealistic in your thinking, and it's unimaginable, and it's very human arrogance to turn around and think that we are the only thing that has evolved to our miserable, destructive level in the entire galaxy of 300 billion stars, or in the known universe, meaning the observed universe.
It's so much bigger too. And not just stars. The planets is even more.
Absolutely. And then to think that, there are, that nobody else has discovered interstellar travel, or nobody else has found how to move through, the event horizon of a wormhole and enter another galaxy, or that nobody else has mapped out pathways through the universe by whatever means. I mean, it's just preposterous to think that. So
I honestly think that this place is too hostile to potential visitors that are far more advanced.
I have maintained that for a very long time. I am convinced, just based on some of the exploration that we did, that there are portal openings, and you'll see. I'll have to talk about the Chaco Canyon someday.
Oh my gosh, yes, you work on the Skinwalker Ranch project extensively. We could talk about that.
Yeah, I did the Unexplained with William Shatner to talk about the Chaco Canyon exploration.
Oh yeah, totally
But
different.
it's a better story because you go there and you talk for hours, and then what they do is whittle you down to 90 seconds or something like that.
Oh wow.
They always do it. So you have no expectations to be a star on those shows.
And you were also then on the Skinwalker Ranch.
I've done, in this past year, in 2023, I did 3 Beyond Skinwalker Ranch.
Wow.
And 1 The Unexplained with William Shatner, all History Channel. So
That was fun. I remember you gave me that target.
Chaco Canyon?
The Skinwalker Ranch target.
Oh, yeah. You were on the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rocky Mountain Ranch, that was called.
My goodness. I was on I don't know if I told you, I was on a cruise with my wife to Mexico. And it was beautiful, sunny, warm. And I brought my family. So I was outside, there was a balcony, and it was a big balcony. So there was a lot of sun, beautiful. And then you gave me the target. I asked my wife to do it with me. And the windows were all open, sliding doors. So it was still warm breezes. And as soon as we connect with the signal line, we were both getting chills immediately. We were like, this has gotta be the target.
Creepy place.
Yeah, I saw some very creepy things, and I was like, what is this? Where did David send us?
I couldn't tell you guys until after.
Which was fun.
It was in the can, and even then they didn't really want me to tell you. But they actually really felt, the producers and then Travis from Beyond Skinwalker. Travis and Eric were in a briefing with me, briefing them on the sheer volume of data that was gathered. And I really think that it was Travis, and Eric who turned around and said, why didn't you do this beforehand and use this kind of information to decide where to go look and where to shoot rockets and that kind of thing? Because the viewers, remember that you were doing the map sensing, and the first portrayal of it was all done as embedded diagrams, which I didn't like because it gave you no dimensionality there. And so with great effort, went through this process of doing a Cartesian plot in 3D, which was very belabored because the programs are typically designed for math plots and, to create simple graphs. And you're putting, in that case, my God, it was like 600 points. You're putting 600 data points into the graph. But when it was finally done, it was amazing looking because we graphed what was on the X plane, which was the surface, and then the Y plane, which was above the surface, and the Z plane, which below the surface when we pulled those all together. And yet now you had a graphic representation in 3D as you could spin the whole target around, right? And tip it up and tip it back again. But I almost crashed that program so many times because it was just a really simple thing. It couldn't even save your work. You had to keep the URL because every time you jump back into the URL, it took you back, to where you left off. And then you'd have to save the URL again, which would give it a new designation because now you'd added all these other points. Very clunky, very difficult to work with, but had the shortest learning curve to do it. And none of the other, math plot, Cartesian math plots would allow you to do it any broader than that one did. So that was really helpful for them as a visual. So because of Travis and Eric and, stating what they stated, we did a second Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, Rocky Mountain 2, same Rocky Mountain Ranch, but we portrayed all the data differently this time.
Wow.
So we put same data, just not as embedded diagrams. We took all the map sense data and portrayed it in 3D. And then when we did the next Beyond Skinwalker, we did the same thing. So there were
3 episodes or 3 different seasons?
2 seasons.
2 seasons.
2 seasons, and now they've got a 3rd season, so it's not going to stop. But they're going to keep using the remote viewing team because I walked out of there and said, well, it's been great. Thanks, miss you guys, and see ya after the last show. And they're like, oh, you guys are going to be back. You gave us more than we ever thought, we would be able to get. Because in the last one, we were actually not only plotting things, but going from the target point itself, giving them elevations and deflections for where to shoot the rockets. Now, I don't know if they followed it, but we were going through the center of all the plotted points, right? And we got an elevation and a deflection for the rockets, which was, instead of them going out there and looking at the property owner who hasn't been there for 40 years and say, where was there anomalous activity when you were here?
Brandon hasn't been out there that long?
No. We're talking beyond Skinwalker Ranch.
Beyond. So this
is a totally different ranch now.
Got it.
So you've got Skinwalker Ranch, which it has its own show. And then beyond Skinwalker Ranch, that still Travis and Eric have inputs on, they're now going
to other
ranches all over the region,
Yeah. That's right.
That particular area, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, in those areas, there's no shortage of ranches with, to use their terminology, high strangeness.
Is that true? There are so many around?
It's a very bizarre area, the desert Southwest, and it's a very, very bizarre area for a lot of reasons. And there's so much archaeological misnomer, and archaeologists just crack me up. It is the funniest thing. They just.
So we're talking about werewolves here. What do we have here in this desert Southwest?
Werewolves.
What do we have? I just moved out here. Now I'm like, okay.
It depends. Like if you go to the Rocky Mountain Ranch, things that came up that in their high strangeness term, remember?
Yeah.
So it's not my term. It's just.
That's fair.
Okay. They call it high strangeness. And what that means is there are weird things like orbs and, boxes that glow in the dark that cause people, they're like transmitters that cause people to stop and freeze, and they can't move. There are things that they were calling white fuzzies, which were like white big feet that were in the Rocky Mountain Ranch.
Keep going, please. I'd like
This
to.
is stuff that, was alleged to have been seen there by the woman who was there as a young teenage girl. Katie is her name, and then reported this.
This is beyond, right? Skinwalker Ranch, or
beyond
is it?
Skinwalker Ranch. I'm not talking about Skinwalker Ranch at all.
Got it.
So in the Rocky Mountain Ranch, so I get there, and of course my my speculation when I get there is, so it's happened in 1974 and 1976, right around the time hippies were, dropping acid, smoking a lot of really bad weed, but nonetheless they're, there. But the police, there are no police reports that substantiate that kind of thing there. So that was just me thinking, being me. And, but I look at other stuff, like they're reporting metallic, hums and clanking sounds under the ground. But so I, look around trying to find solutions to things. And I go, well, 1 mile over that way, since 1951, Shell Oil has been fracking over there in addition to frack points everywhere else around this area. This area is not shortage of fracking. So if 1951 fracking a mile away to the northwest, it's feasible that the sound being heard under the ground was fracking, drilling and fracking. It's also an area that's filled with aquifer, and it was filled with aquifer, you can tell because they have these center point swivel agricultural areas. When you're in the air and you're looking down and you see all those green discs on the ground below, there's an aquifer there, huge underground systems of water, sometimes flow, sometimes are quite stationary and fed by surrounding areas. But they will drill down into the aquifer, tap the aquifer, and they have a pump that sucks the water up. And there's a huge sprinkler system that stays there permanently attached, and it just rotates and sprinkles. That's how it waters. You can tell when aquifers have run dry because you will still see the mark on the ground, but nothing will have been grown there for a very long time. And usually the sprinklers have been detached and moved elsewhere where they can get in tap water.
Oh.
That place has dried aquifer all around it, which means you have large caverns under the ground that are used to hold water that now don't because it's been tapped and drained. It's in an area that's right next to, it's due east of the U.S. Air Force Academy, which is by definition it is the busiest military airport in the military. Aircraft coming in and out of there. South is Fort Collins, which has a big Army aviation capability there. And north, there's another one. So the whole point is there's a lot of activity that could explain a lot of things that go on there, but not white fuzzies.
I was about to say, what about white fuzzies?
And the remote viewers several of the viewers drew this black creature that was like 3 to 4 feet tall.
I drew that too.
Well, this will freak you out.
Great.
It was a little bit disturbing to me that we briefed this dark 4 foot, 3 foot creature, 3 foot high creature. I briefed it because you sketched it. There were a whole bunch of other viewers that sketched it. And some of the viewers sketched it like evolving, like coming up out of, how like a vehicle or coming out of a portal. It was difficult to tell. And I then briefed it to them, and it was, I think, Greg Bustamante and Paul. They turned around to me and said, oh, my God, the grandmother here, for the people that own the ranch, lives right, 200 meters right up there. And when we got here, she said, don't piss off my little friend. Quote, unquote, don't piss off my little friend, to which they went, what do you mean? And she said, there's this little black 4 foot or 3 foot high creature that comes around. It looks like it has black fur on it, walks on its hind legs, and it comes around and it just hangs out in the front yard or in the backyard. But I've got a relationship with it. It doesn't bother me, and I don't bother it. So don't piss it off, because I don't want to be bothered by it. And they're telling me this, and I'm like, well, there you go. I mean, there could be, I don't know, there could be a lot of things involved in the backstory of that. I have no idea.
I
just
still
know.
remember the visuals from that viewing exercise.
Yeah.
And the slightly hunch over being that's 3, 4 foot
Yeah.
living in a cavern, and there's these I don't know what they're called. They're like icicles, but they're rocks.
They're called stalactites, and
Yes.
it's stalagmites are the ones on the bottom.
Is that inside of the cavern?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a limestone deposits. It's mineral deposits from the water dripping over
That's
the
it.
centuries, over the millennia that it drips. It drips down to the top, so it forms a stalactite attached to the ceiling. And as the drip drops, it forms a stalagmite below it. It builds up.
I saw those, and then I was like, I'm really creeped out, Charis. And yeah. And then I was like, oh, well, we'll see.
Here we
if
go. Yeah. That's what happens. You work spooky targets,
It was fun. It was really fun.
Yeah.
So speaking of Southwest, since we're here,
Yeah.
what else is high strangeness? We're talking about no werewolves, or is there?
No, there are no werewolves.
Well, vampires and
No.
let me see what else I wrote down.
I mean, all the high strangeness has nothing to do with werewolves or vampires.
Okay.
It has everything to do with alien life forms or alien craft, or that what they think are alien craft. But, I can break everybody's bubble on that. I think probably this is a conservative number, which would be to say like 93%. And I think more an accurate number is like 98% of the UAPs and the UFOs that we've seen are really part of the space war program. We have been in a space war since 1945. It was declared in 1945. And the chief of staff of the Army, who was an Army aviator, along with a physicist, realized that the next dimension of war was going to be space. And here we were still flying piston-driven aircraft in 1945. But they knew that, the nature of war was not going to change. Just the way in which war was fought and where war is fought will change. So the next dimension was going to be space. They didn't even, I don't think at that time they even had any concept of cyber war, that dimension of war. But that too is a war that's ongoing every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There is a war ongoing. They are trying to find our lives, our secrets out. We're trying to find their secrets out. They're trying to be able to access our people. We will try to block them from doing that and then access what we want to access. People get all antsy and nervous about that and, go protest the NSA and flip the NSA off and things like that. Hey, the NSA is only trying to find bad guys. If you want to get pissed off at somebody, get pissed off at Google and Amazon, and Apple and Yahoo and everybody else, because they're harvesting your data and selling it as fast as they can harvest it and package it. It's worse than real estate mortgages. They are doing it as fast as they can. Billions of data points collected on people every day and packaged and sold to the highest bidder, which could be China, it could be Russia, it could be Iran, it could be any belligerent or just any place that's going to market to American consumers. So you want to get upset about something, get upset about that, but don't get upset about the NSA. I mean, the NSA has a backdoor into every one of these platforms, and they have it because those platforms give it to them when they request it. But they're not rooting around in the back of those platforms. They don't care what kind of sneakers you're buying, or what kind of purse or clothing, makeup, food. They don't care. They're looking for people that are talking about blowing something up or killing somebody or, trafficking children or something else, right? Remember, we talked about, you want to talk about something ugly, the largest business on the planet right now is trafficking of human beings. There are more slaves right now than there have been in all the history of humankind.
Is that due to technological advances, social media, transportation, or population growth, or all of the above?
It's human perversion and consumption of that. It is the largest industry on the planet right now. It surpasses the oil industry in billions of dollars. And in terms of, it's reaching or has surpassed $1 trillion a year in trafficking human beings to be used as sex slaves or, and that includes children. It is a frightening statistic, and there are lots of other things that go down from that as top. So I'm grateful that somebody is looking for that and trying to close that down and trying to find it and trying to find where to attack it. So that, that cyber war is a huge tool. But drop that now. The space war has been, and I have a slide we should look at sometime. It's actually an animation. I did not do the animation of UFO or UAP sightings, but an organization that captures and logs that stuff did. So you can look at this, and when you recognize, because it shows it on the animation, the years going by, like 1900, 10, 20, 30, 40. So in 45, when the space war is declared and a budget is given for it and a 50-year plan is established and briefed and approved in the Pentagon, when you look at this animation and you see when all the lights, which are UAP and UFO reportings and encounters, when you see that, the further you go on to the right, on the calendar from 45 all the way up to present, there is an actual direct correlation of the increase in technology development in the space war and the number of those kinds of sightings that show up. So all the orbs that the whole idea of lifting body aircraft, advanced propulsion systems, aircraft that are steered with non-conventional, flight surfaces, that stuff, we were testing lifting body aircraft, meaning no wings, in the 60s, starting specifically in 68 at Edwards Air Force Base. We have not even yet broken the sound barrier. Yes, we had, but we were already testing lifting body aircraft. That meant they had non-conventional.
So those vertically take off, or just
no? Lifting body means the body of the aircraft becomes the lifting surface.
Oh, wow!
So with propulsion, conventional or very non-conventional, hybrid, exotic things that they've been working on. The body itself. So in other words, specifically design something that has a point to it and maybe a wedge shape to it. But what happens is that wedge shape, the body itself becomes the lifting surface. So with forward momentum and the proper configuration of the leading edge, it becomes a lifting surface. That creates the lift that brings the aircraft up. Then you have unconventional flight control surfaces, which means if you're a normal pilot and you're looking over, you don't see a vertical stabilizer, you don't see ailerons, you don't see a horizontal stabilizer, you don't see any of these things because it's unconventional and it's built in such a way that you don't see it. Why a triangle? Because the triangle, that shape is the only shape that is stable in subsonic, supersonic, and hypersonic flight. So that the development of craft and weaponry, space stations, Air Force astronauts, not NASA astronauts, Air Force astronauts, because they're fighters. So the observation platforms, the satellite killers, or what they call sat killers, all of that stuff. We took down our first Soviet satellite in 1968. We shot down a satellite that was in orbit. It was in orbit over our planet, and I mean over our country, and we didn't want it there. So we had a Navy pilot, strapped a sat killer missile onto it. He flew up to the edge of the atmosphere and launched it when he was told to launch it based on its tracking and intercept capability. It found it, fixed it, and took it out. And then we told the world that we just took out one of our old communication satellites. That wasn't it. Now, and then you start to learn about black programs and gray programs and the stuff you see, or you see in Popular Mechanics, or you see it in something else. Those are all gray programs. For every gray program, there are 10 black programs that are still being funded and researched and developed and flown and tested. And if one of them doesn't meet their expectations, all of its development gates, next thing you'll see is that'll be the new gray. That'll be the new gray program.
The gray program, meaning they'll tell people?
Yeah. So they put that out there to have everybody look at it and go, oh, look what they're doing. But the black programs you'll never see, or if you do see them, you'll see them at 80,000 feet or 200,000 feet up. You might get some glimpse of something, but you won't know the black programs. And you never will know the black programs because there's no precedent for you knowing it. And they fly at weird times and they come down and they are weird shaped aircraft that it's like there was a picture of a Navy pilot a Navy aircraft, fighter craft, and it's a two-seater, so the back seat guy, and it's on the internet, and the guy takes a picture with his iPhone, takes a picture of an object that drops and appears to them, and this picture then is shared on the internet, so it's now all of the UAP, UFO people call it, instantly, as soon as it shows up, it's leaked, a leaked photo. It wasn't frickin' leaked. The guy took a picture of it with his iPhone and started texting it to people, right? That's not leaked. And he didn't call it a leaked photo, and he also didn't call it a UAP. He said, look at this thing. We couldn't figure out what it is. And it looked like it was standing still. Well, I took that image and blew it up like close to 100 times from where it was. And now I can see the outline of the fuselage. And then I know all of the existing gray programs that are out there, right? And I can take and change the attitude on anything, and I can match that profile to a number of different gray program aircraft that are out there. But again, if there's gray programs, there's black programs, which could be almost identical, but just different aspects of them now that they're more advanced. But the particular craft that this was, in my opinion, was a thing called the Cloud Chaser or Cloud Dreamer. It's a reconnaissance aircraft. It's unmanned. It flies. It can stay in space for an extraordinarily long time. And when it comes down, it has a re-entry speed of 18,000 miles an hour. So it comes down. And the comment made by the guy who took the picture that it looked like it was stationary in the air, everybody thought that meant it was hovering. And it even looked that way to the pilot and his navigator or gunner in the back. But that is what you were looking at, was the fact that they had no static reference point. So when something comes down out of the air at 18,000 miles an hour, and then it's going away from you, and you're flying in the same track, and now it's doing that, you have to have a static reference point. You have to have mountains or clouds where they are in your peripheral vision for you to be able to gauge your speed and its speed relative to you. Because you don't have those things, because you're up at 25,000 feet and you're flying in a perfectly clear day. There are no clouds. There's nothing, no static reference point. You can't tell
if they're static or not.
It's It's a common a hallucinatory effect that takes place, and there's actually in the FAA manual, there's a name for that, and that name, they attach it to the fact that without a static reference point in the day or during the night, objects in front of you, including the landing strip that you are getting ready to land on, pilots coming into a landing strip in a dark area, and all they have are the landing strip lights, pilots get a sensation that the landing strip continues to move away from them. It's a very real sensation. So the only way you're able to overcome that is, number one, understand it happens. Number two, the only thing you can rely upon is your own airspeed indicator, your attitude, your instruments.
That's why instruments make sense.
Right.
So, wow. Does that sound like the Donald Rumsfeld's comment about the missing, 23 or so trillion dollar back then when he was asked? And he said there are things that are known knowns and there are things that are unknown unknowns.
It very well could be, but look,
He wasn't
when
going to
Kennedy
answer that.
went before Congress and Kennedy went before Congress in 61 or 62, and the title of his briefing to Congress, which was a special session, was Urgent Needs of the Nation. He asked for $9 billion. And the $9 billion people thought was going to go to the NASA space program, but which started in 58. And then Kennedy kicked it in the butt because it wasn't really doing anything. And he goes, urgent needs for the nation. Well, I can't imagine a sitting president going to Congress and titling their remarks Urgent Needs of the Nation to ask for money for a space program, the NASA space program, which was the space race, right? And that which was supposed to be for all humanity, right? Wasn't entirely focused on us. It was all humanity. It actually became a diversion for the American people and the people of the world away from the idea that there was a space war building and escalating. Because out of the $9 billion, $7 billion went to the space war effort, $2 billion went to NASA. And that went on and still going on today. The space unit,
Now it's the Space Force.
Space Force, yeah. That was actually supposed to be installed in the 70s, were the original plans for that. It was supposed to go in the 70s. And one president after another, including the Air Force, kicked it down the road because the Air Force didn't want to lose the budget. It's a big budget for them. They didn't want to lose it. So they became the sole managers of that all these years. When the Army Air Corps in 47, 48 became the Air Force, all those years the Air Force managed that budget. And
Until Donald Trump.
yeah, and he was just enacting. There was a bipartisan team of Congress that several years before Trump did that stood and tried to get President Obama to establish the Space Force, which he did not. So it wasn't President Trump's idea. He was just enacting on what was being recommended at that time. The Space Force needs to be here because the battlefield of space, the dimension of space, is now being, the belligerents that are potentially there are really getting thick. North Koreans, Iranians eventually, right? If not already, Chinese and the Russians and other belligerents that, as soon as they can figure out a way to put something up there. And there are all kinds of really disconcerting kinds of weapons that are up there that, looking down, that have a capability to do things.
I remember going to the peaceful uses of aerospace technology conference at the UN in Vienna. That was 2010, I think. Yeah, 13 years ago. And I don't remember all the things they were talking about, but I was very impressed. And that was 13 years ago. And if you're telling me back in the 50s and 60s they were doing all these things, I could only imagine what in 2010
Yeah.
they were actually alluding to why they were needing the peaceful conference and what is happening in 2024 with AI and more quantum computing and all of the access that we have now.
The intent is, I will tell you very honestly, is to put space stations up there. And these will not be like the International Space Station.
Makes sense.
These will be logistics, storage, and loiters that they will put tanks and heavy weaponry in. There are plans to put special operators into various kinds of holding stations until they're needed. So picture it, you would have a space station up there, self-contained, and you'd have a team of Delta up there, or a platoon of Rangers, or maybe eventually more. And they would be there. Why would they be there? And why would they rotate them up there? Because currently, if there's a hot spot in the world that you have to attend to, you only have two mechanisms to get them there. You have to take them by ship, which, depending on where it is in the world, can be 2 weeks before you get them there. And then all of the other logistics packages to follow. If you're going to take them by plane, you can get them there sooner, but you can't get everything they have on the ground and sustain it on the ground without pulling all of these packages up to do that. So whatever they're going to be there for, it's extraordinarily high risk. Not that they won't accomplish the mission, but that they can be supported and extracted from the mission. So, but if you have these weapons platforms in space, you can put them anywhere on the planet in 30 minutes because they're in non-geosynchronous orbit, which means that the planet is moving, 15,000, 18,000 miles an hour underneath them. Doesn't take long, to do your reentry from low orbit and get to where you need to go, and right? And then you fight, and then an extraction force comes and gets you in some way. But that's the plan.
I actually got invited to a rocket launch this weekend in Florida, and it was supposed to happen. I was supposed to leave tomorrow, but I mean we're still filming, so I didn't choose to go. Right? It was some project. I think they're building some sort of a museum in space, and they invited us to put some upgrade material in space. Supposed to last forever, which is awesome. I feel honored they invited us. I think Elon's
sort of a
launching.
time capsule thing.
Yeah. I calculated the time of our filming and the travel. I was like, it's probably not realistic.
It won't be the last time, I'm sure.
Yes.
That happens. But yeah, I mean, I know we kind of diverted from high strangeness and werewolves and vampires, but
fantastic.
Yeah.
Are we okay to keep going for a few more? I have some other high strangeness. This can be either in 2 episodes or in 1. People listen to it, right? So since we've been talking about basically space war, right? What about aliens? Like you guys spent some time doing off-planet missions. I'm assuming before they send anything out there because that's an efficient use of resource, right?
Yeah. The issue again is there were lots of depictions of alien life. There were lots of depictions of other civilizations. And how they started doing it, just to go back to your calibration concept, is you go where you do have some feedback, like the moon. And the concept of the target becomes this landing point or that landing point because there are photographs of what exists at that landing point. If you send them to the backside of the moon, well, you don't have photographs of that. So there's no feedback for that. Again, it becomes experiential only, anecdotal. But you have evidence now that you're showing viewers back in the unit, or as we do it in training, because I do train people to do that. I want them to see that the whole space-time concept.
One of the higher level trainings
Yes.
And we're going to have that in, I think you call it Mastery or Explorer inside of our
Mastery
level
won't
5
be
training.
it. You'll get it in Explorer and you'll get it in Advanced Techniques.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. We'll have to talk about that in the next episode. What each of the levels are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please continue.
So in the historical file at the unit, there were all of these examples of calibration, like Olympus Mons, or or looking at the Twin Peaks, any place that, like where a rover was and where it had pictures. So now, or describing the rover. I mean, you knew that viewers were on target, and that became good calibration data when somebody's sketching a rover and they're talking about a rocky red area, or they're describing large caverns, large, long underground tubes, which are lava tubes in and around Olympus Mons, which they know are gargantuan. And there are caverns in those tubes, at least described by viewers, and which individuals that understand lava tubes and what happens, especially with a volcano the size of those on Olympus Mons, they concur that the caverns that are described, they're as big as the island of Manhattan. Wow. And while viewers can describe surface elements, terrain and colors and textures and temperatures, taste, smell, etc., when they start describing underground civilizations or the presence of deceased life forms and those kinds of things, now I get it, but I have to step back, even what I saw in the unit, and go, okay, there's no empirical evidence of this.
It's all calibrated.
Well, the calibration is the surface. I have empirical evidence of that.
Oh, got it.
I know what the rover looks like. There are pictures of it right there.
Right.
It took pictures of itself. And I also know what the terrain around it looks like. And I know what Olympus Mons looks like based on pictures or based on something else. But I don't have any kind of empirical evidence, and I can't allow myself to speculate or to jump to an anecdotal conclusion that, because this part's right, that part is right too. What I can say is, does it increase the probability that it's right? It does, doesn't it? But I still can't say it's an absolute, that it's there.
I would love to explore and see if there are certain programming techniques or tools that we've developed in Upgrade that could allow us to do something like that, and then have empirical data to prove that the calibration was accurate.
You could only empirically establish a possibility for increased accuracy, or not increased, but accuracy, consistent accuracy across the board. But I would love to see the try. But I'm saying, from a scientific perspective, they will never buy it, because it's still,
you don't have proof.
you have no empirical evidence of it. But so once all of this is done, it's complex to describe how they do. They did several kinds of things. Open search outward, which was a very deliberate Cartesian system designed to create a box in the known universe, because you do realize that we now know that the universe is not infinite. Came from a point of singularity. We're measuring the expansion of the universe. We've been unsuccessful in compressing the universe back to its point of origin. That was what Stephen Hawking spent the greater part of the last 10 years of his life trying to do. But based on how it's expanding, and we know then that it came from something into this and is expanding outward, that means that there are all sorts of mathematical models as to what the edge and shape of the universe would look like. There's basically three different kinds of shapes. One is kind of a disc folded over, looks like a saddle. The other is spherical. The other is, a flat plane looping back on itself as well.
It sounds like building a simulation of some sort. And it's constantly expanding because of its computing power and storage.
But if we want to entertain the notion that our universe is no longer infinite, begs the big question, what's it in? If it came from somewhere, where did it come from? Because the point of singularity doesn't mean that it exploded outward, it means that it came from something. It came through something, like a wormhole came through the event horizon from this point of singularity. Matter and energy came from one place through something.
So we're
into
talking about
something.
potentially, because we're talking about the universe, there are likely other universes.
Yeah. It's not what in physics the many worlds model is about, but yes, it has everything to do with this whole idea of multiple universes, and that there are, it's like
The so-called worlds without end.
yeah, it's like the quantum foam of space time. It's an infinite series of these bubbles which represent universes which are connecting back on themselves and connecting to other universes. And if one spills into the next, it creates another. But even if you're talking about an infinite number of, the whole idea is, as is the micro, so is the macro. So the quantum foam of space-time, think of it like the bubbles in a head of beer in the head on a beer. Okay, awesome. So, but what's all that in? It has to be contained in something, or maybe it doesn't. And that, to me, is why I think the whole idea of where are we going after this existence is pointless to me, because where indeed might we go? And why might we go there? And that's why I don't have anything to do with reincarnation. I think that's total crap. Total crap. It would be ridiculous. If there is indeed a creator, why in the hell would you put people in here and expect them to redo and redo because of some idea that you keep redoing until you do it right? Who defines that? So, but leaving this existence and knowing that we existed before we came here, we cannot
worlds.
be who we are. We cannot be the energy that we are, because, it's, if we somehow die and what we are, our energy dies, then there goes the second law of thermodynamics.
It doesn't.
Okay, because energy does not die. It cannot be either created nor killed, destroyed in this existence. So therefore, we came from somewhere as energy. We are born into this existence, and we live in this existence, and hopefully we live the most powerful life in this existence, born with the ability to recognize and utilize omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, and eternal nature. And one must ask, why would we have been given those tools if we were not to use them to create a better understanding, to create not a utopia, but a life of loving and giving and improving and abundance and exploration in our minds and in any other way, to truly live to a potential that we were gifted with when we came into this existence.
To
Instead,
upgrade.
we've institutionalized every method imaginable to extract that from us, from our children, and from us, and to assign those qualities to something outside the physical realm, that sight unseen, that we must accept only on a basis of faith, as long as you pay for it. Because no church is free. Not really. Yeah, it's ass backwards, if you ask me. So to answer your question about do alien craft want to come down here and land, I think that they frequently pass by, and I think the mother and father driving the alien craft look back at the kids and say, aren't you fucking glad we don't live there? That's what I think.
That's why we gotta upgrade. And in fact, that leads us to a question, which we'll answer in the next episode. What does it mean to be omniscient, omnipresent? What's the history of these words? what happened to us assigning this, or did someone else assign this to a being? And I would love to talk about the notion of how an entity outside of this realm can harness specific power, if you've met any. And you don't have to answer this now, because I remember you told of a story when you were literally traveling through different dimensions in one of your ERV exercises, and you met some beings that were outside of this realm. And I'd love to have the listeners and the audience hear a little bit about that in the next episode. And we'll actually talk about what's inside of the upgrade level 5 course that we're going to collaborate on.
Okay.
And I think it's time to take a break.